The Caucasus was one of the first, if not the first, area in Asia, in the Orient, right, where opera came, because you had opera in the South America and like India and other colonial realms. The Georgians themselves didn't really weren't really interested in the Georgian theater. They really loved Italian opera. They didn't really understand Russian theater. Armenians attended the Georgian theater a lot more, also because they understood Georgian, of course, those in Tbilisi. The Georgian nation state was a continuation of the bigger Russian revolution, the February Revolution, in smaller, local, little Georgia. That's how they see it.
Hello, everyone. Today, the guest of my podcast, Unfiltered History, was Luka Nakhutsrishvili, who teaches critical theory at Ilia State University in Tbilisi, and he holds a PhD in Comparative Literature from Tübingen University in Germany, and who is the first fellow or fellowship program of Yerevan Center for International Education. And today we talked about cosmopolitan Tbilisi in Russian Imperial time in mid-19th century, and we discussed how opera, one symbolic phenomenon, opera became the part of this, became the symbol of this transformation, the symbol of this modernization. We discussed how it became the place of fusion of Georgian, Russian, and Armenian presence in this city. It was very interesting, very, very illuminative conversation. Please watch it and be engaged in history. Hello, Luka.
Hello.
It's nice to meet you again, and it's nice to have you as a guest during my podcast. And today we're going to talk not only about the Caucasus, that is kind of something that unites our two nations, and the time of Russian Empire in the Caucasus, but also I would like to talk a bit about you, about your professional path, about your interest, about the topics you are engaged in. Let's start with you. Just introduce yourself to our audience.
I'm Luka Nakhutsrishvili from Tbilisi. I work at Ilia State University, which is about to be closed down by the Georgian Dream government in the framework of this new so-called education reform that they are now forcing through, as so many other things. So for the moment I'm at Ilia State University at the Institute for Social and Cultural Research. I started out as a philosopher, received my PhD in Comparative Literature, and then moved on to become a cultural scholar, trying to merge many different disciplines in the humanities when approaching different topics such as the one we will be talking about today, right? Because my overall interest lies in how modernity came to the Caucasus, and Tiflis is, of course,
the center of the
Caucasus. And it's I'm one project is this Vorontsov period with opera and European theater arriving. Then I'm also interested in Georgian revolutionary culture and the Georgian Mensheviks and the first Georgian Republic. So those are some of the main topics that I try to tackle.
Okay. And you are in Armenia through the
I'm at
fellowship at the Yerevan Center for International Education. We had Zhanna as one of the hosts, and she announced a bit about your fellowship. Can you detail it?
It's a 3-month fellowship for that the center launched last year. I can proudly announce that I'm the first one. So I'm the pioneer.
Congratulations!
And now others have also joined the group. Unfortunately, I'm here only till end of March. I really would have loved to stay longer, because it's really been a wonderful experience, both at the center and in the city, exploring so many, and around the country, exploring so many things. But
but you can come.
Of
It's
course,
not
yeah.
it's not
Far.
so far. It's not so expensive to visit Armenia.
The problem is, I think, if I may, I think Georgians for a very long time, particularly my generation and the post-Soviet generation, with all the nationalisms and everything, that has really created these very strict separations between not just the borders but also imaginaries, right? And how we belong, and to what we feel we belong to. It's really and this Europeanization discourse also in Georgia has created a culture where Georgians have ended up feeling they are situated somewhere between Switzerland and France, maybe, and not the Caucasus. But this happened to be such a shallow, such a superficial project that we ended up with a Georgian Dream authoritarian government, which has been able to dismantle this entire project in just a matter of 2 years. So, and it's also a way for me to rediscover and to resituate myself maybe in the region, and also thanks to the topic itself, 19th century Tiflis, to find my way back to a different kind of form of belonging.
It's a very interesting phenomenon, and it is very strange, of course, very weird, I can say, that we don't know each other. We lived and we live now for centuries as neighbors and more or less good neighbors. We never had such animosity, but at the same time we don't know each other. As subconsciously we think we know each other, but when I tried to start some scholars in Armenia who are engaged in Georgian studies, I couldn't find them. Of course, we had Asya Adarpinyan, who is a fantastic translator, who are engaged in these matters. I had another guest, Lilith Medican, who also was involved in research of Armenian church in Georgia. But that's all, And I don't think that there are many scholars in Georgia who are interested in Armenian.
Yeah, that's I'm both in the Armenology school in Georgia and the Cartphilology school in Armenia seems to have really basically died out. I just have the impression that maybe on a more everyday level, Armenians know a lot more about Georgia, and they go a lot.
A lot.
Tbilisi, right?
Yes, Georgia is one of the most popular touristic routes.
And I think Georgians only started to discover Armenia nowadays because of the cheap flights from Zvartnots and it took me 38 years to finally. Of course, I had been to Armenia, but I had never even thought of maybe living a couple of months and really engaging with the language and discovering the culture of really the closest neighbor from a bit
Okay. Again, it's I wanted just to focus to concentrate on this issue, because I think it's very, very important to have this collaborative project, to have just mutual collaboration, because our languages are not so easy for each other, and having collaborative projects with Georgian and Armenian scholars, I think, would be very, very beneficial for both parts. And that's why I think thank you for coming to Armenia, and I think maybe your being here would create these bridges between two communities, scientific communities. Now let's come to the time that we were in one entity. It was Russian Empire. It was Russian Empire that came to this region at the beginning of 19th century. Again, in Armenia we have this discussion how to call this Russian coming to Caucasus. There are people who advocate for invasion, for conquer, but there are other people who could call it liberation. But more or less it was colonial policy of Russia. Russia enlarged his borders, went to so-called warm seas, and so now we see Georgians and Armenians in Russian Empire, and let's start our conversation with this time of Mikhail Semyonovich Vorontsov, a person who is ambiguous figure, of course, but at the same time, can we call him the father of modernism in this region?
Well, I think the previous governors had tried different modernization approaches, like resettling German colonists to the Caucasus,
yes.
right? And the different things that they tried. But with Vorontsov, it's really, I think, the first thorough, all-encompassing, and really ambitious project. And because he's viceroy, he's the first viceroy who has plenipotentiary powers. He's also allowed to do a lot more stuff, to decide on his own, and that's why he's allowed to he's able to do so many things much faster, right? Because otherwise the previous governors had been obliged to always write to Petersburg, wait weeks and months, then receive the answer, and then it was already too late. So with Vorontsov, you have this sensation which everyone talks about, of acceleration of time, that things are happening in a matter of days and months that otherwise would have taken maybe years and centuries. So that's this acceleration of time experience, which is maybe even more important than what was actually accomplished. So, but he's certainly the emblem of this very, very all-encompassing Europeanization, also of urban culture.
So, just to my audience, Vorontsov was appointed as general governor and even viceroy, right? He had this title of viceroy of Caucasus. So he was just kind of person who could rule the new reforms in this province, and he did it. And one of the symbols of his reforms was this story of theater Karamansaray you are researching. Please just tell us the story of...
So there are lots of myths around how theater and opera came to Tiflis, right? And in the sense, the Caucasus was one of the first, if not the first, area in Asia, in the Orient, right? Where opera came, because you had opera in the South America and like India and other colonial realms, but really in the Asiatic Oriental space, Tiflis was maybe the first, and also it was very specific in the sense that, unlike Odessa or Constantinople, it didn't have it was landlocked, so it was improbable that something like opera would emerge in Tiflis. And people think that, at least Georgians today, love to tell the story in a way that Vorontsov wanted to lure the rebelling Georgians into submission by
giving something,
soft power, soft power politics, and somehow managing to lull Georgians into becoming opera freaks by gifting them with Italian opera. But in reality, Vorontsov only wanted to establish a Russian theater because his bureaucrats were bored in Tiflis. There was not much to do in Tiflis. And he invited a really second-rate Russian troupe to start performing all these cheap vaudevilles, because you also didn't have a lot of proper Russian theatrical repertoire besides Griboyedov's Skoria Duma and the Gogol's Revizor. At that time, no Ostrovsky, nothing much happening yet. And then there is this other guy, that's Vladimir Sologub, whom Vorontsov invites from Petersburg to become the cultural manager, so to say, of his theater project, who starts to think about Italian opera. But how the theater is built, that's also a very, very, very important thing, because he wanted to build a separate theater. There was no money. He had to go to the Armenian merchants, which was the most powerful economic community in Tiflis at the time, to ask them for money. And that's where Gabriel Tamamshev, one of the wealthiest man agrees, but it's kind of a public-private investment agreement, we could say, in today's terms, where Tamamshev agreed to build a building which would inside house the theater, and it would be surrounded by a trading facility, which would belong to him. He would be allowed to rent all the shops, the chanut, right?
Chanut, yeah.
And chanutner, is that the plural?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. You see, and the theater would belong to the municipality, and all the. The tickets and everything would be sold by the municipality, and you have this very strange fusion, which emerges out of a very pragmatic compromise, which they were obliged to go into because the government just didn't have money. But then, when this hybrid building appears in 1851, there's the solo group who praises it as the fusion of art and commerce, and it's really bestowed with this very lofty idea of civilization, where these Oriental Asiatic subjects, like the Armenian merchants, are supposed to start shopping, to trading with European exquisite goods, and also to start attending theater and become good European subjects.
Okay, so it was in retrospective kind of interpretation,
exactly,
right? Not just a deliberate attempt to social engineering or pragmatic acknowledgement of Tiflis hybrid reality.
No, it's then the painter Gagarin, of course, decorates the interior of the theater in this Mavritansky, this Moorish style. And this is what it becomes famous for. And also, of course, the new opera house, which we still have, is also in this Mavritansky style, right? Which comes at the end of the 1890s, also in homage to this earlier theater which burned in 1874. But no, it was really a very contingent, ad hoc thing, and that's why it's interesting. You see how the empire works. Not with a premeditated plan, but having to compromise with different local actors.
So I want to stress that it was, as I understand, if I understand rightly, that it was not just policy already created and of Europeanization of Asian colony, or it was
that also. I mean, overall, Vorontsov's project was, of course, about that. Also, by importing all this French fashion and starting balls where all these wealthy families or the Armenian the merchants and their wives and the Georgian nobility would be obliged to buy expensive new French dresses to appear at Vorontsov's wife's ball in the Viceroyal Palace, and there is this overall trend of the demand for European goods which emerges, and this caravanserai, which was not supposed to be called the caravanserai in the beginning either. It got the name caravanserai because people were used to have caravanserais around. So it was a very atypical caravanserai. This was also supposed to, with the European theater, it was supposed to become a completely new kind of trading establishment by offering new European fashionable goods instead of whatever was being sold in the bazaar, the Armenian bazaar and the Maidan and the old part of the city, right?
And and what do you think? What was the interest of Tamamshev? Was it just business project for him?
It was,
or maybe he knew. I think being a businessman in today's term, maybe he had some European partners. Maybe he traveled. He saw all this stuff somewhere in Rome or Paris, and he wanted just to create something in his own. It's just my speculation.
I already told you about the Georgian mythology, right? With this Georgian resistance being crushed by Vorontsov, by luring them into becoming opera lovers. And what my impression from reading the contemporary Armenian accounts of 19th century Tiflis is that there is this idea of the great Armenian benefactors, right? The mecenatstva, right?
Yeah, yes.
And that they were also just, giving everything to Tiflis, and that now Georgians who have become the exclusive masters of Tbilisi do not acknowledge this contribution of the Armenians anymore. But when you look at the sources, Tamamshev is really, and the agreement and the negotiations, and how Tamamshev behaves also later. It was really just a business agreement. And already in the 60s, he feels that the theater is just, he really wants to get rid of the theater.
No.
And he is even, and the archival material is really fascinating, where you see he was already bargaining with the municipality to have it transferred outside of the city. He was even ready to pay a lot of money to have a separate theater built elsewhere, in order to have the entire building for himself and to transform it into a real caravanserai with an inner yard, with much more shops, maybe a stock market. So it's so this marriage of art and commerce, which was promoted in Vorontsov's time in the early 50s, very soon starts to become a divorce process, which ends in the 70s when there's this fire.
Yes, fire. Before we come to fire, I want to know how this theater functioned. Who were singers? Was the life, the cultural life, active?
Mm-hmm.
And also the third question about the elites, how elites of the city just considered this theater. What if it became a favorite place for these people to go?
It was basically the first important European kind of public space. 700 seats, quite narrow, very stuffy because there was no ventilation, so it was really only usable in the colder months, and they were really suffocating there. But otherwise, in Vorontsov's time, it starts really well, and it's considered the golden age, where you have the troupe of the Georgian nobility, the Georgi Aristavis troupe, which starts performing Georgian plays. You have the Russian troupe. There are Italian singers arriving and forming their separate troupe. Ballet. There is no Armenian theater until the 60s, and Sundukyan's first play in 63 is staged in this theater. But my impression is that because Vorontsov had quite secure direct contact with the Armenian community via nurses, they didn't really need to push this other cultural soft power project. Whereas in the Georgian case, the Georgian Orthodox Church had lost its autocephaly, of course, in the 1810s. And there had been this revolt in the 20s by the aristocracy, so they really were trying to
pacify.
Exactly, So and this was one way of engaging them. And it's when it comes to the public, of course, there are lots of Russian officials and militaries because the Caucasus War was going on. So that's where it's the public is composed a lot of Russian militaries, diplomats, the Armenian Mokalake, the merchantry, the citizens, and the Georgian nobility. And then there's the Rayok, which the plebs occupying the cheapest seats. But later on, one has tried to present this Vorontsov period as really a golden age where all these different genres coexisted together. But in reality, we know that the Georgians themselves didn't really weren't really interested in the Georgian theater. They really loved Italian opera. They didn't really understand Russian theater. Armenians attended the Georgian theater a lot more, also because they understood Georgian, of course, those in Tbilisi. So everyone rushed to the Italian opera. And then after Vorontsov departs, the Georgian troupe is dismantled. At some point, there's only Italian opera. At some point, there's only Russian theater. And up to the 70s, then you only have like a stable troupe of Italian opera singers and a stable Russian troupe. The Georgians only perform from time to time, and it's not until the Sundukian starts to stage his plays and Chemishkian to form his Armenian troupe that also becomes kind of the backbone for the Georgians to also start re-engaging in their own theatrical culture. So yeah, but it's for the Russians writing in the Caucasus, right, in the official newspaper, and for many travelers also, going to the theater and observing the public is also a way of an ethnographic exploration, because you have the people in European dresses, you have all the different kinds of
glittery outfits, right?
the papach and the Georgian women's headdresses, and you can really study the different social and ethnic
and also, I think, a good place to meet people. To make some business, maybe.
And
communicate with.
And it was also in terms of for Georgian and Armenian women for the first time becoming public, right? Of leaving their, as the Russians called it, the patriarchal seclusion, and taking off their chadors and the dressing in these European gowns where they would expose bigger parts of their body to the lusty men. And this was a sign of this place having become really European in a certain sense.
Okay, and why? What happened in 1974?
That's also a very interesting thing, because besides all these troops coexisting in a very narrow space, of course, they would also had to share space with all the merchants around them, right? And you really see, following all the materials that we have from the 60s and the early 70s, that this coexistence doesn't go well. It's just too much, and there are permanent collisions in who wants to use this building how, and who needs how much space.
And it's natural.
It's natural, but also
crowded space.
It's not as it's you didn't have this kind of a building everywhere, right? It's a very peculiar hybrid, which really brought so many groups under one roof. And you also have this infrastructural obsolescence starting, because it's really the most impressive building when it's built in the early 50s, but by the early 70s it's already considered to be outdated, and it has many problems, and we still don't know what exactly happened, but there is this one petty merchant, Ivan Lazarev, not related to the famous Lazaryan family, but Hovhannes Lazaryan, a merchant from Ananuri on the Georgian military highway, who is accused of arson because the fire seems to have started from his shop. And we learned that he had insured his goods in two different insurance companies. He wanted to get the insurance money, and he burned his own shop in order to engage in this speculation. And the trial itself is very interesting, and we'll also learn a lot about the building itself. But it seems that at some point this famous marriage of art and commerce really ends in disaster, also because there are all these different tendencies, these material infrastructural processes, and these institutional, somewhat pathological processes that were meant to lead to a major catastrophe, and that's why in 79, when Tamamshev reopens the building after renovating it reopens without the theater, and so he gets it his way.
So the fire destroyed
the interior,
the opera.
Because the Lazaryan's shop was just one wooden cupboard away from the opera library. That's how, and his shop seems to have been in a spot which had belonged to the library earlier. So people are really improvising there, and you don't really get who is deciding where to build what or where to add what. And from the opera library, then the fire spread to the auditorium and completely destroyed the theater. It really damaged parts of the caravanserai, but it remained. Tamamshah was able to refurbish it.
Can we consider the policy or the attitude of Tsarist administration concerning to this case as attempt just kind of cover the problems with urban planning, the problems with because as I know, it happened also because city lacked a basic fire service.
Fire service, exactly. Yeah. That's in many cases, in many ways also, and the theater itself, Tamamshah apparently didn't maintain the basic safety rules, which were like, there was a water basin on the upper level, which was supposed to be used in cases like this fire, and it was empty. And there was a lot more wood being used in the construction, a lot more than permitted for safety reasons.
So that's why they had the need to frame this as a criminal act.
Well, it was a criminal act, frankly, but then, but
also to avoid some responsibility of not doing the things they had to do.
In the Caucasus, and then the prosecutor, who's of course a Russian, frames everything as this greedy Armenian merchant trying to gain profit even at the expense of the public good, right? He's even ready to burn down the most beautiful building in the city in order to gain some public good. But then there are others who really, and what we get from the materials is this bigger picture of a bigger infrastructural, institutional mismanagement, which led to something like this. It's. And that's when later a proper fire service is installed, because this was also not the only case. There were lots of fires happening also because of speculation, because of people tried to get their insurance money by burning down their own properties, because the the insurance companies themselves, they were very liberal in evaluating the properties. Because there was also lots of competition among the insurance companies, so they needed a lot more clients, and they attracted clients by providing, by evaluating the goods for higher than the actual value, and it's this huge, really economically, financially very speculative and very pathological environment, which then motivates individual people to act in delinquent ways.
Interesting how this story can be stored in this very, very difficult environment of imperial construction, modernization project,
of capitalism.
Rise of capitalism, change of everything, change of perception of your life, because. And I think it's maybe one of the most interesting periods of human history because of inventions. Every year they could have new devices, as we call now, new things, new to use. And in this modernization projects, we see also competition between communities, right? Because in the 1860s, we know that Armenians made up nearly half of the Tiflis population, while Georgians were only less than a quarter. And how did this situation how they tried to accommodate each other, or it was more not about accommodation, but more about competition? What can you say?
Of course, there is this famous collision between the Georgian nobility and the Armenian merchantry, starting from the 40s, the 50s, because the Georgian nobility is going broke. Also because Vorontsov is implementing all these new trends, which are very expensive, and the Georgian nobility is not really good at
at finances.
Finances. So and they really end up in the hands of being dependent on Armenian money. And then there's also and there you have this very classical romantic divide between the city as belonging to the financial and the bourgeois elements,
right,
and the provinces and the land, the village as
so again to just clarify to our audience, so Georgian aristocracy mostly set in their villages, in their castles, from medieval point of view, in their castles in provinces, and they ruled their lands,
serfs and their
serfs and peasants, because they had hereditary rights and hereditary power. Armenians, who didn't have all these aristocratic origins, they were more mobile, they were more engaged in trade, in merchantry, in all these relations with European trade, even from external goods, and they made money. And because trade was mostly something that was done in cities, they urbanized Georgian Caucasian cities, not only Georgian. Gori, Tiflis, Baku, and all these cities, they urbanized them, and so there was kind of not only national, not only class collisions between these two groups, but also kind of how to say, the perception of life was different between these groups. Am I right?
You're absolutely right, and that's why, and also the Armenians are much faster. They start this entire nationalist intelligentsia also among Armenians emerges a lot faster because they have all these connections, right?
Yes.
To the Lazarian Institute, all the way to Venice, and all the way down to Isfahan, and so it's really a different kind of belonging in the world, whereas Georgians only start with that in the 60s. But there's also a lot of still, the identities are not as separated from one another as as from the end of the 19th century on, when this nationalism as a paradigm really entrenches itself and becomes somehow starts producing completely mutually exclusive narratives also, which of course is becomes official in 1918 when Tbilisi all of a sudden becomes a Georgian capital, when the Mensheviks abandon the Transcaucasian Republic and basically stab the Armenians in the back and force them also to move to Yerevan and to make that their capital. Also, Khatisyan had been the mayor of Tbilisi. And is really not happy about leaving his hometown. Whereas all the Georgian Mensheviks were from Western Georgia, really just had moved to Tbilisi 20 years ago only. And so you have this process starting only much later. But otherwise, a person like Gabriel Sundukyan, who was a hardcore Tiflisian, right? Yeah. He is able to translate his own place into Georgian, and he's friends with Agits Ereteli and all the other the Georgian elites. His family correspondence is partly in the purest Georgian that you could ever write. So it's
Yes, they mostly consider them Caucasians than Armenians, Georgians, and So in Armenia we have this criticism, by the way. Now we have this criticism. We kind of accuse these people, saying that you could do the same thing in Yerevan. Why have you done it in Tiflis? But it's today's view. It's today's point of view. For that time, people they never separated this free parts of this of Caucasus. For them, it was just part of Russian Empire, Caucasian part of Russian Empire, and they try to navigate in this nation. And the next question again related to this one: if Russian Empire exploit this jealousy to maintain control of the region or not?
Well, of course, there are many ethnic tensions that they try to how do you call them?
To fire. Yeah.
Right. Well, of course, the most famous one is the Armenian Azeri clash, right, which starts around the 1905 revolution. But even before, of course, there is lots of tension emerging in Tiflis, in particular, when the Georgian intelligentsia is gaining traction and starting to become somewhat nervous about Armenian power in the city, and all this battle for the power in the Tiflis municipality starts, and then there's the Georgian nationalist camp around Lilia Javadze, which is more more aggressive to the point of really becoming Armenophobic, and then you have the later Mensheviks, the Social Democrats, who try to have a more conciliatory stance and find other ways of dealing with the problem. But and the Russians certainly also, particularly in the Caucasus and the media discourse, they try to push this conflict, as a manner of the dividend.
Yes.
But in the Georgian Armenian case, I think it's the. In the Armenian Azeri clash, the Russian imprint is a lot more palpable. I think it's really a lot more visible, and the Georgian Armenian story is maybe even more intimate family clash. Between two brothers. There's a lot more to that.
Yes, and they're not so fierce. They're not so bloody, I think.
No.
Maybe we don't know. It's not explored, but I never just encountered such bloody clashes and during the Armenian Tatar.
Absolutely not. And it's of course the paradox and the big tragedy is, of course, that the only war that has ever happened between Georgia and Armenia was when the nation-state framework arrives to the Caucasus, and when you really have to delimit these territorial borders very strictly and start to start claiming, putting forward territorial claims, which you didn't really have to do within a broader framework. So that's.
Yeah, and here we're coming. We don't have much time, but I wanted also briefly discuss your another topic you're engaged in, and when you send me some materials to prepare for this podcast, I was very impressed with your research on revolutionary sovereignty, and because I always thought about Georgian Mensheviks and kind of international power. Yes, they were Georgian by their birth, by their origins, but at the same time they were part of the global international revolutionary movement. And we see a lot of Georgian, very prominent figures within the Russian social democratic movement. And it was very interesting, very strange for me, but also very interesting to see how these people turned into the Georgian nationalists coming from the broader thing. And now let's discuss this.
Actually, that's the common view that these Georgian social democrats, who mostly became Mensheviks, and there was only a very tiny fraction which sided with Lenin, and that's where, of course, Stalin and Nikita and all the others come from. But before Sovietization, the Bolsheviks had really basically no footing, besides Batumi and Baku, of course. The Mensheviks were the driving force, and they became the force around whom basically the entire Georgian nation rallied, including the nobility. Everyone accepted that politically the Social Democrats were the driving force, also because they managed to have the peasantry behind them, right? With this famous Gurian Republic during the 1905 revolution, etc. And then the common view is that in 1918, they all of a sudden, from revolutionaries, become nationalists and just bourgeois statesmen, which when you study the political language of that time, and that's where I, as a cultural scholar, try to contribute with and to somehow revise the traditional historiographic accounts and also contemporary popular memory is to see that basically the only real reason why the Transcaucasian Federation appears is, of course, that the October Revolution happens and Trotsky is giving away half of the Caucasus, and the Armenians, Georgians, and Azeris have to find their own diplomatic voice, right?
Yeah.
To keep the Caucasus intact from the Turkish military advance. And then there are all the different geopolitical smaller events happening, which leads the Georgians to just overnight abandon the federation and leave the Azeris and Armenians a bit shocked. But still, all the way during those 3 years of the Georgian Democratic Republic as well, what you hear is that they want to maintain the gains of the February Revolution of 1917 and to continue the democratic path of the revolution, which the Bolsheviks had abandoned, because they considered the Bolsheviks to be the big traitors.
Yes, betrayers of
right?
revolution.
Because we know the Bolshevik narrative. That's what the Soviet propaganda managed to impose by completely erasing the Georgian Menshevik contribution and their dominance in Georgian revolutionary history. Even today, we just cannot even imagine how powerful a figure Noé Jordania, for example, was. Right? He was really a kind of vorsht. And it was completely erased by really just destroying material, by eradicating the social democratic opposition and rewriting history. So my aim is to really look at the revolutionary language that they continue using during the Republican period, and in contrast to instead of saying that on the 26th May of 1918 the revolution in Georgia ends and a Georgian nation state starts, I want to say the Georgian nation state was a continuation of the bigger Russian revolution, the February Revolution, in smaller,
small local
little Georgia. And that's how they see it. And they also, there's this Valiko Djureli, this famous military personality leading the People's Guard, who is infamous for his very bloody suppression of the Ossetian revolt and many other clashes that happened around that time. He even talks of, in his diary, he talks about re-exporting revolutionary democracy back to Russia and helping the Russians to get rid of the Bolsheviks. And it's always the imaginary is always mapped around this bigger post-imperial revolutionary space, and there's also this bigger historical arc of the revolution as a world historical paradigm starting from the French Revolution, because they really feel themselves to be the heirs of this big French Revolution thing, that the Big Bang in France, which had started, and which the Russian Revolution with its many national parties had taken over.
Interesting. Yeah, because I always wondered how could these people who we were expecting to be more unionistic in this Caucasus, how they just kind of betrayed this idea of having.
It's the only. I mean, it's they were. When you look at the national theory of nationalism that Jordania and other Mensheviks develop, it's really it looks to the so-called Austro-Marxist school, where they were not opting for territorial autonomy or independence, because they knew that in the Caucasus, which was so fragmented and so multi-ethnic, where in what was considered the Tbilisi and Kutaisi gubernias, you really had only a small core which was fully Georgian, right? Otherwise, it was interspersed with Greek, Armenian, Azeri, and other villages. They knew that the only way to advance self-government was through cultural autonomy, without putting claims to territorial integrity and territorial statehood. And that was, I think, a common understanding back then. Maybe the Nashnaks were a bit more demanding of, territorial claims. But it's really just a geopolitical constraint which forces the Georgian Mensheviks to abandon their own theory of nationalism and to become fathers of a nation state and to engage in a politics which then leads them also to wars with Azerbaijan, with Armenia, over territories which they had wanted to avoid in the first place, right? So, of course, in a certain sense, they are nationalists during the Republican time, but if we only see that, we really impoverish the picture and the overall revolutionary dimension, which was the driving force for them.
Interesting, and that's why we need more cooperation in these matters, because yes, it was the biggest, the most significant mistranslation or misunderstanding we have in Armenia, and because it's very important for us too, especially for the specialists who are engaged in research of time of the First Armenian Republic, and to understand all the processes that went on in Caucasus in 1950s. Okay, it was very interesting and very, very illuminating for me. And I have traditional question when I try to discuss with my guests the future of humanities or future of social sciences, because in our world social sciences and humanities, they are underestimated, and people more focus on technical or natural sciences, and they just consider our field as purely theoretical subject, saying that, okay, you're writing about abstract ideas and you should turn it into real life matters, real life issues. So, and my first question, why is it vital to keep studying these fields?
Well, I can respond from my political context, right? Because, of course, you have this entire AI thing, which is apparently, they try to frame it as if AI is making universities completely obsolete, etc. And that you have this global trend to even crack down on the more the natural sciences and the technological disciplines, right? Even Trump, he's not only attacking humanities, he's also cutting funds for medical and other research which one would consider useful, right? It's really just a global attack on knowledge, on scholarship, on critical thinking as such. And in Georgia, this global trend has taken on, as always, much more fierce, provincial and exaggerated form. And as someone coming from Ilia State University, which is hit hardest in this big education reform that they are announcing, which is really now destroying basically whatever we had of high education, which already had a lot of problems. You can see that besides wanting to economize money, to not spend even that little amount of money which they had been spending, because we had been living off students paying their tuition fees, right? The government was not contributing a lot to a state university that we were. You also see that there's a very deep political interest in wanting to have students that are less educated and to rid universities of academics who are politically vocal, and who, as in my case, I think, have really tried to use their whatever I'm doing, right? This blend of disciplines across the humanities, to put this to public use, which me and my colleagues with our students have demonstrated as for example, in the case of this very big social movement that we had against this project of a huge hydropower plant, Namakhvani, a couple of years ago, where you had this big alliance between students, scholars, NGO activists, local grassroots movements, ecologists, etc., and which the Georgian Dream really wanted to break up. And it really saw that the critical knowledge that was being produced from anthropologists, cultural scholars, philosophers, whatever, in these state universities was crucial in providing arguments, maybe, and becoming also a large factor of solidarity to less powerful grassroots movements in the Georgian regions. They really want to also break up whatever potential the field of humanities, for example, can have in producing knowledge that will be politically useful and dangerous to the authoritarian policies that they want to push through in economy, in dismantling democracy, etc. So that's a very straightforward political
you're right, because I read some time in a research about correlation between decrease of PhDs in humanities and the rise of popularity of Trumpist ideas. And the first during his first term, the research was done during his first term, but I'm sure that this development shows us that if you downplay humanities, you create a larger space for manipulations, more possibilities just to use these people, kind of throwing false narratives, because humanities and social sciences, they are first of all critical thinking. That is important, just to navigate in this ocean of information and fake news and all this stuff created by people who are involved in political manipulations. You're right. I absolutely agree with you. And my second question, more personal. Why did you personally decide to dedicate your life to this issue, to this path? You could be chemist.
Academic? No, I was terrible in all the natural sciences and the math and everything at school.
And what was this point that just clicked in you that I want to do this?
I actually, at first, I wanted to become an opera director. I'm a big opera fan. That's how I started engaging in this question of how opera arrived to Tbilisi, because my father had, had been taking me to the opera from my early childhood. So it was really, I got infected with this very, very early on. But then there was this new faculty that emerged, which had lots of interesting courses in philosophy, social sciences, political sciences to offer. And that's where I first got interested in philosophy. And then I went on from there to move into literary and cultural studies, basically engaging in German, French philosophy, not having to do anything with Georgia or the Caucasus. And at some point, already around the PhD period, I really get politicized and start to resituate myself in my own place and start to think about how modernity and this entire Europeanization project came to the Caucasus and how it interacted with local forces and how local resistances emerged against various imperial projects, etc. So this is and then this all took on also a very direct political function for me. So that's why because I do not consider what I'm doing on the scholarly level as separate from myself as a politically active citizen, that's what keeps me going and thinking that it's not just a personal quirk. Also because I this project, this Theater Caravanserai project, and me coming to Yerevan, I really thought that it was a very personal idiosyncrasy, also depending on my ability to merge different disciplines to produce this transdisciplinary project on the Theater Caravanserai, merging archival research, cultural studies, literature, all sorts of things, and also different languages, now including Armenian, which I will continue to study thoroughly, to be able to read the 19th century Armenian press from Tiflis, etc. I realized that in Yerevan, there are lots of people for whom this project, and not just the project, but my approach, which tries to overcome these nationalist, narrow, mutually exclusive views of 19th century Tiflis, that this is important. And I hadn't expected that. And you mentioned the function of a bridge, and I really felt like I myself am going through a personal transformation also, because I'm enlarging my own horizon. I'm discovering something which is both extremely alien, because the language is completely different, the Armenian historical trajectory is completely different, but still it's I'm now starting to discover it as a part of myself which I hadn't known was part of myself. And then there is this broader social function which I really would love to fulfill by using this kind of research topic as a way of engaging in other less nationalistic and less provincial and less isolationist ways of thinking about how we could belong together to this Caucasian space.
You're right. And it's mutually enriching.
Absolutely.
It's not just about something giving, but also it's something about taking. And it would be very, very productive if we work together.
Absolutely.
So let's be in touch and
let this be the beginning.
Yes, and I hope to have you again with your new projects and talking with you. It's a great pleasure for me about the new projects you decide to do, and if we can help in some way, please inform me. Thank you very much.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you.